Hello and welcome everyone to today's cloud coaching session on shredding and querying in Visual Builder with the Offline Toolkit. Thank you for joining us. My name is Tara Van Cleve and I am a marketing event manager for the developer initiative here at Oracle. Today, we're excited to dive into some demos and show you how the toolkit works and provides caching and offline support at the HTTP request layer. We'll also be recording the session and you'll receive the recording via the same email you registered with for today's event. If you have any questions during the webinar, please drop them in the Zoom chat and Q&A areas and we'll be ready to help answer them. We've also set up a channel in our developer public Slack called Cloud Coaching North America that you can access at the QR code or at bit.ly/odevrel_Slack. We'll leave that channel open after the event to contact us directly with any questions and to share resources and upcoming events in the series. So today's webinar will be presented by Varun Yadav, Senior Cloud Engineer, Aditya Trivedi, Senior Cloud Solutions Technologist, and Sean Cartwright, Senior Cloud Engineer. So without further ado, I'll hand it off first to Varun.
Thanks, Tara. Hi, everyone. So we'll just quickly go through the agenda and we'll jump right into the topic. So for agenda for today's call is we'll go through the Visual Builder overview just to give an idea like what Visual Builder Cloud Service is. And then we'll focus on the offline persistent toolkit and we'll talk about the shredding and querying in offline persistent toolkit. And we'll show you a quick demo on how to use those library and how we can work with the Visual Builder to achieve offline persistence. And at the end, we'll just do a quick overview of the Code Innovate program that we have in Oracle and a quick Q&A. And also feel free to ask questions meanwhile during the chat itself. And yeah, I'll just get started. So what is Visual Builder Cloud Service, right? So Visual Builder Cloud Service is a low-code, no-code app platform where you can create mobile or web applications, and that is hosted directly into the cloud, right? So Visual Builder is built on top of Oracle Jet framework, and it's a platform where you can do drag and drop of the components. It's what you see, what you get kind of thing. And it comes with a pre-built of let's say more than 50 components. So if you want to drag and drop the table, input, buttons, all those things are pre-built. So you can simply drag and drop those into the canvas and directly you can see how the end user will interact with that page or the application. And you can always modify the properties of those components, and it also displays, if you're using the laptop or if you're using the iPad or mobile application, mobile device. So you can see how it will look like on those devices. So it's very responsive. And in terms of security, so if you want to hide certain components or some certain pages from the different roles, so let's say there is an admin role and there's an employee role. Maybe admin wants to see a detailed page or the detailed preview of the page, right? So we can hide certain components based on the role preview. And additional web components are also available. So if in the case of let's say if you have want to build a custom component, you can use Oracle Jet and build custom components and upload that into the Visual Builder. For the folks who are using the SaaS application, right, they are familiar with the Redwood theme. So in the Visual Builder, you can create the application with the Redwood theme. So Redwood page templates and the theme is pre-built. So you can leverage those. So if you're basically extending the SaaS application, you can use this Redwood design. And with the Visual Builder, you can also create the mobile application, right? So if you want to deploy your mobile application, right, it uses the PWA, Progressive Web Application method. So you can simply distribute it on the Android or the iOS device. You can package that and it creates the link or the QR code. You can distribute it to your end user and it will simply install on either Android or iOS devices. And with the mobile application, obviously you get a few more components, right? Let's say you want to use the camera on the device, or if you want to get the user location, scan barcodes, all those things are available. And obviously you want to test it out on the different devices. So you can see on how it will look like on, let's say, iPhone 12 or Samsung mobile, or even on the tablets like iPad or something like that. So we can directly see it on the app itself, and and the end user can see like, how the app will look like. Visual Builder is not only limited to like drag and drop functionality. You can use your code and like basically just simply like it's HTML, CSS, JavaScript. So let's say in the case where you want to write like on your own custom code, you can simply switch to the code view, and it uses the Monaco code editor. So if you're familiar with like Visual Studio IDE, it uses the same IDE, same like under the scene Monaco editor. So it gives you like the rich code editor. Comes with the feature like syntax highlighting, code syntax, pop-up formatting, all those things. And you can modify the code and then switch to the design or the live view to see your code directly into the action. So you can either like drag and drop the components, or if you want, like in a case where you want to like maybe add the style sheet or like modify some element, you can switch to the code view. So in terms of like the business logic, right? Let's say the user adds the button and want to perform some action whenever there is a event triggered, right? So everything is visual. There are like set of pre-built actions that you can drag and drop into the canvas, and you can modify that property, or how what the action is supposed to perform. And I think pretty much like this year with the release, there is option where all the actions are created by default in like JavaScript. But if you want to create a new action, you can choose whether you want to do it in a JavaScript or JSON format. So with that, basically, you can just modify like the JavaScript functions and right, how your function actions want to perform. So for example, let's say we want to call the REST endpoint whenever we click the button. So you can just drag and drop the call REST action from the predefined actions, and you select your endpoint, and it calls the endpoint, right? And a few more components are available. And if the action is not built in, you can also define your own custom action. It's simply just the JavaScript function. You can just write your own JavaScript, and then it will call that function. And all the functions are reusable. So like, let's say if you are using all the actions are like reusable. So if you use the action for, let's say, one single button, then you can use the same action for another button as well. And it's very easy to debug. So all the logs are recorded as well whenever your action is like working in the flow. So you can see like step by step, like, okay, this action is triggered on, particularly like this flow is triggered. So you can see all of them in action. And Visual Builder not only like have the like GUI feature, like you can also use it to store like the data itself in the application, right? So it comes with like 5 GB of default storage, and if you need more, you can connect to your autonomous database as well if you want to store more data. And what it does is like simply creates like you can create a table over there and store the data. So it's like very simple to do. If you already have like the Excel or CSV file, you can upload those files directly into the business object, and it will create like the structure and import data as well. And you can also create the relationship between multiple objects, right? So if you have like maybe employee table or department table, you can create the relation between those. And with the database feature, right? Like, so if you want to import the data directly from the autonomous database or the DBCS, then you can simply choose that option, like connect your database, and it will show you all the pre-built schemas, and then you can directly leverage that into the Visual Builder. And obviously it comes with like the very powerful REST API. So if you're using the business object, then you don't have to worry about like creating the REST endpoint on how to access those data in the business object. It will give you like all the CRUD operation, and it comes with like powerful filter and like querying capability as well. So all of this is available like out of the box. And as I say, like basically you can just import or export data with the business object. So if you want, if you have Excel or the CSV file, you can simply import that, and even it can export the data into the CSV file. And the main thing about the visual builder, right? Like, I mean, for any other app as well, like how do we fetch the data, or like, where's the data source is coming from? So in visual builder, you can have like multiple options. So most popular is obviously the REST services. So you can connect your REST API directly into the Visual Builder. So it will consume from the public facing REST API, and it's supposed to support all the authentication methods. So if it's using the basic auth, OAuth 2.0, if it's the Oracle API, then Oracle authentication as well. So depending on the authentication, you can choose that, and you can always add like the headers and all those things. And if you are using the Oracle Integration Cloud, then you can directly select that, and it will show the list of all the integrations that you have built to consume in the Visual Builder. And of course, like if you're using SaaS application like HCM, ERP, those things, and then you can just directly connect that SaaS catalog into the VBCS, and it will show like all the APIs available from your SaaS platform and to the Visual Builder. So it's like very intuitive. It gives you like, all the APIs, and then directly you can work with it. And define by specification is basically if you're using Open API or Swagger, then it will show like, you can basically use the specification in the Visual Builder. This is the very small screenshot. I might not be visible, but like it's it just show you the page, like how you can configure the REST API. And as I discussed, like in terms of like security, you can choose your authentication. If you're using like proxy, you can define that like over the course. And let's say if you're promoting your app from dev stage or prod, you can change the backend based on the application status. So that's pretty much about the Visual Builder overview. So hopefully, like the folks who are maybe using it for the first time, it's clear. But for the rest of you who are already using Visual Builder, like let's talk about the offline persistence toolkit, right? So what is offline persistence toolkit, right? It's a JavaScript library that provides response caching solution. So if there is a need, right, where your application is offline, or you want to use in a state where it might be in a low network area where your application might go in the offline state, right? So user wants to like fetch the data, and uh, it displays on the screen. But if the device goes online, we want to keep it in the persistent state. And that's where the offline persistent toolkit comes into the place. So it will cache all those responses, and it will store it in a offline state, and basically in the cache, right? And then users can simply interact with those data. So in addition to the providing the capability, right, like it also supports the feature of like shredding the response payload, and it can be used basically, let's say, to update or like perform the CRUD operations even when it's offline. So when the user comes back offline, comes back online, it will simply like just update the state online. Like it will perform all the REST calls that we are doing in the offline. So we'll just talk about like what is threading and querying. And as I just discussed, like what does the offline toolkit does? So offline toolkit simply like cache all the response payload. So here for the example, like if this is our payload that we are trying to cache, right? Like the employee ID, it has like basically the employee details, right? It has like employee ID, first name, department ID, and we have like the multiple object for the employees, right? So here it will cache like whole payload. And since let's say the application is offline, we are able to retrieve the whole payload even if it's offline. But what if the user or basically want to perform the operation where we want to make a query based on like, let's say, employee ID or the department ID, and want to get like the single object out of it, right? In that case, we need to have some kind of like mechanism in place to perform that operation, right? That's what the shredding does for us. So rather than storing the text of the response payload as a document, the payload can be broken down or like shredded into individual object and the property which are written as entity into the persistent store. All right. So here the entries can then be queried via the properties that appear in the response. A request with the request parameter, let's say, question department ID equal to 10 will produce 2 entries. So even if the device is offline, this response will be produced by querying the local store and extracting the 2 matching entries. And in this case, like, the employee ID 100, if we are querying by department ID 10, so it will give like us the 2 records of that, right? And to achieve this capability, the application must configure a shredder, unshredder, and query handler when initializing the default response proxy from the endpoint. So if you see like a syntax for the JavaScript over here, so it simply does the shredder, like we say like, okay, this is our shredder, like based on the employee ID. And we are using the unshredder to retrieve back those records. And the query handler is based on that employee. We'll discuss more into the demo. So if it's like getting confusing, please feel free to ask in the chat as well. So there are like we'll discuss like types of shredder and the query handler. So there are like 2 types of like shredder. So Oracle REST JSON shredder and Oracle REST query handler. So it conforms to the Oracle REST standard. So it's very similar to the simple JSON shredding. The only difference, if you see, like, if you want to, let's say, like, use the query equal to like department ID equal to 10 and so on, like, so it uses the Oracle REST standard, and that's where it's used. It is used. And another one is like simple JSON shredding plus simple query handler. So this is for the simple JSON structure. So in the previous example, we saw like, where we have like 3 records for the employee, and it's a very simple flat JSON structure, but in reality, it might be different, right? But for the simple structure, we can simply use the simple JSON shredding and perform the query based on that. So when do you need the custom shredder, right? So in reality, like I was just talking about, like you might not have the simple flat JSON payload, right? It might be nested payload, or it can be like multiple hierarchical payload. So in this case, like you can see like the employees or the records are wrapped around data key over here. So in this case, basically we want to basically cache like the whole data, right, instead of like the single object. So this is where like the custom shredder comes into the picture. So to basically not only cache the like flat JSON, but the whole payload itself. And yeah, with that, I will pass it to Garthia to showcase basically directly into the BBCS application and how it's done and implemented. Aditya, over to you. And yeah, if you guys have any question, please feel free to ask in the chat meanwhile.
Perfect. Thank you, Varun. Okay. So before getting started, we know this shredding and querying is a little bit of an advanced topic within the offline persistence toolkit, whole realm. So Shay here, who's our product manager, he has published a blog already on how to add these offline capabilities to your Visual Builder app. There's a really nice video. If you haven't seen it, you can go through it, in which he uses an ORDS REST endpoint and caches the data onto the app, and then also shows how you can handle create calls, right? Because this toolkit not only does response caching, but also does request caching, right? So if you're online and if your app has the ability to create new records and you're doing those things while offline, it will store all those calls, the HTTP requests, and then when you're back online, you can implement a code where it then syncs with the server, right? So pretty good video. Please, if you have time and if you're interested, you can go through this. But in this blog, he also gives the code which is required to implement offline toolkit, right? So the libraries are already included within the VB package. All we have to do is basically just import them. So if you look at this code, it's similar to what you would see when you go into your JavaScript section of your app, right? The define, and then there's an app module and all that, right? So what you have to do is basically add these libraries persistence manager, default response proxy, util fetch strategies, all those. Add them into the function too, so that you have them and you can reference it within the code. And then there are a couple of functions which are very important. The first one is the offline handler function. And then the second is the handle request. And I would say the third is the app modules prototype create offline handler, right? These three functions are the main functions. And then the other ones that he has included are just for, just showing the possibilities, right? So there is a sync request handler before, after, all that, and then the handling of the post call and all those things, right? So basically, what I did is I took this code, right? I go through to my application. I just paste it here, right? And then let me just show you the function first. So this is your entry point, right? So without this line or this function, the offline toolkit will not be, let's say, activated, right? So if I keep this commented out, and if I click play, and if we go to the console, you'll see that none of in the logs, you'll see there is no mention of the offline toolkit at all, right? But if I go back to the app and I uncomment this, and if I click play, then you'll see that all sorts of logs are loaded for the offline toolkit, right? So meaning that it's basically there. We just activated it, right? We just created an instance of it. Correct. So in my app, just to show you what it is, right? It's just a table. It's an API with 3 records. I'm displaying it. I have a button that reloads the data, basically calls the REST endpoint and reloads the data. And then I have a filter on department ID, right, which basically just calls the endpoint with a query parameter of department ID equal to whatever value I put in here, right? So what I've done currently is I've just activated the offline, the offline handler. But then the next important thing to take a look at is the actual offline handler itself, right? So the function offline handler, and within this, we give the options, right? And these options and all of the functions and all of that is available in the Oracle documentation, right? I'll put in a link, but if you just search for offline persistence toolkit, it's in the Oracle GitHub, and all of the documentation is right here, right? So what I've done is I've just kept it as is what is in Shay's blog, right? He just has fetch strategy, and the fetch strategy is what? Get cache if offline, right? So basically, if the app is offline, just pull everything from the cache, right? Don't actually go and try to make a call because it's going to fail, correct? So with this, what I have, let me again click play here. Let this app load. And I'll just show you what it does in the backend, right? How is it storing this and where is it storing this? Actually, let me just clear the site data. So basically the offline toolkit, what it uses is the indexed DB. So as you can see, I just cleared everything. Let me go back, let me hit play, and then we'll see the stores that get created within it, okay? So you'll see there are a couple of stores that get created. One of them being the offline caches. So currently I have no Shredder implementation. So this is the store that gets created by default if you just activate the offline toolkit, right? And within this, if you check the by sequence, you will see that the call that was made to fetch this data gets stored here, right? So the whole call is stored. So the request data, what I sent, what method it is, what the URL is, everything gets stored with the response data. And in the response data, if you see in the body, this will be the actual body of what the data is displayed, right? So it is stored as a whole document instead of individual ones, right? And we'll come to that. But this is how it's stored, right? So now what happens is, in case I go to network and I change, so if I do offline, and now if I search for, let's say 10, it's not going to work. And you see it tried to make a call which failed because I'm in offline mode, correct? And we don't want that, right? We know the data is here, we have cached it, then why not just search it so that it can automatically give me it without going through the server, right? And that's where actually the shredder comes into the picture, right? So you get this code, JSON processor, and then you enable the shredder. In this case, since my REST API is not an Oracle REST standard API, right? So it doesn't accept the queue parameter, or it doesn't accept limit or offset and things like that. I'm just using a simple JSON shredding, right? So basically meaning whatever the keys that I'm getting in the data, I'm just going to use that as a key for my query, right? So I'm just using that. I'm saying get shredder. All these methods again are mentioned right here. And this says, it will process it, the shredder will only process the first level in the hierarchy. And I'll get to my second example where it is a nested level. But currently, since it is just a flat data, right, flat array, I can just use this get shredder, right? So I just am putting this. This first argument it takes is the name of the store that you want to create, right? So if I go back to my app, and if I go back to my application, so this name that is what I'm just defining there. And basically, I'm just saying what is my primary key, right? What is when it divides, each record, what is the unique ID it can use to do that, right? In my case, it's employee ID. So those two are the arguments. And then for the unshredder, basically, it just doesn't take any arguments, but you have to provide an unshredder because basically what this does is, as it says, right? So shedding into multiple records, and this unshredder just does the reverse of that. So if you do a query where it's returning more than one record, you want it to go back as an array instead of an object, right? So this basically is what it does. And then query handler is also, again, a class within this. So if you see, this is a query handler, and I'm just using the simple query handler function, right? So coming back, and then I just have to say which store to apply this query handler to, right? So I created an employee store. I'm just saying to the query handler on that store. So that's all I've added. And let me go back here, and I don't need to clear anything. I'll just hit play. And oops, sorry, this always happens when you're doing offline online. So I hit play, and when I go back to application, you will see that a couple of new stores pop up, right? The first being the EMP store. So we gave it the name EMP. Internally it appends and does all those things, but this is how you would identify that this is your store. And then when you open the store, when you look at by sequence, then here you will see, instead of it being one large payload with all the 3 rows, it's shredded it into 3 different rows, right? So 101, 102, 103, based on my employee IDs, correct? And then if you look at the values, you'll see that all those values are just there, right? So now if I basically just go offline, and let me just clear this, let me clear the console. And if I just search for 10, this should basically just bring it back, right? So now you see here in the network log, it's not actually making a call because the data is stored right here, and it's just getting it from here, right? Same thing if I search for 20, it's going to bring back 20. And if I remove it, it's going to bring back the whole payload, right? So it's doing all of that from this shredded store. So that was about the shredder. But now let's say there is a scenario where, let me show you that payload, right? So I have 2 versions of the same API, right? So this is the one that we just looked at. But let's say if there is a scenario where the response looks like this, right? So it's one level nested, right? So how would this play into this thing, right? So if I go back to, if I go back to my other page, I've created another page for that. And this is currently loading data with the second API, okay? So if I basically, I'll just have to change my entry point so that it loads the second page instead of the first page when I click play here. So if I hit play here, again, I'm sorry. So if I hit play here, then you will see on the console an error that says there was an error in cache.put for the request, this thing, right? And this happens because that is one level nested, and the base implementation of the shredder doesn't know, right? It can be any values, right? So how can it predict where your data is, correct? So if I go back to application, you'll see that no new records are inserted. And in that scenario, basically, is where you need to use a custom shredder, right? And a way to use the custom shredder is basically there is a GitHub, a link I'll also share this, which has a lot of good examples and documentation on how to use this. And if you just search for shredder, there is a whole section that describes how to use it and where all you can use this, right? So shredding and all that. But basically, this GitHub also includes, if you go up to the files, this also includes the source, right? So if you go to the source, you will see that these are all the same classes, basically, that you're seeing here, right? So it's the same implementation. So what you could do is you can go into simple JSON shredding, and you'll see a function here called getShredder. And this is basically what we are calling as of now, right? The one that is in the library. This is what we're calling. And just you can either take the whole class, which I have another example for, or you can just take this particular function and its dependent functions, right? In this case, this is a very small file. It only has 3 functions. So what I did was I just copied all those functions. I came to my code. I went into the JavaScript section, and I just pasted, and I just pasted the get shredder here and the get unshredder here, and that third function, whatever it is here, right? So I just created my own functions based on what the functions they had, right? But you can also paste the whole thing like I've done for a custom query handler. You can just paste that whole thing, define your own custom object, and then import that onto your main app module, this thing. But in this case, I've just added get shredder, get unshredder function. And if you look at the code for the get shredder, within the code, there is a line right here, which used to be this, right? So basically what it's doing is it's getting the response, parsing the response into JSON, and then it does its whole, whatever logic it needs to do to split the array into different records, right? But in this case, since my data is one level nested in the field of .data, so what I've done is I've just added a line that says, hey, go and check if there is a data field in the response. If there is, then do the parsing of that. If not, then just do the parsing of without the data, right? So basically just handling a condition where both scenarios are handled, right? And so basically I've just overwritten what the basic get shredder implementation is, right? And then what I did is I go back to my offline handler function, right, where I had specified the shredders. And instead of using the simple shredder dot whatever class method name, I'm basically using my own, right? So I'm just saying don't use the simple JSON shreddings, but use this function below that I have overwritten to do it, right? And now if it's saved, yep. And now if I hit play, we will see that here it says data may be stale. And if I refresh, you'll see that more records were inserted based on this table, right? And if I go back to console, you should see that error of the cache put has gone away, right? So depending on your use case, if you have like 2 levels, 3 levels, 4 levels, whatever level nested, you can always overwrite this function Just change a little bit of the code, and that should work, right? And that is get shredder. Same thing we need to do for get unshredder, because when we send this data back to the table through the SDP to view, we need to send it as an object within the data and then the array of all the records, right? So this was the line that was previously in the function. I just changed it to this line for my particular use case. And then, everything else just works automatically internally, right? So that's how you can use a custom shredder if in case there is a need. If it's all flat array structures, then you can just directly use the simple shredders, right? Another thing that I just wanted to show was, so if I go back to my app, let me change my start page to the first page, which I had. And I'm just going to have to go back and change a little bit of my code so my first page loads properly, right? Okay. And if I hit play again, let the first page load. Oops, it didn't save. Did it? Okay, it didn't save. Okay. Yeah, now it should. Okay. So another thing to remember, and Shay talks about this in his, this blog and video too, is that if we look at the application, right, and the stores that are getting created, right? So this is the store that we created for the shredder. And then there's a lot of other ones, right? But the sync log is the store to look for when you want to see what are the requests that have been cached, right? So if you're offline, you're making a bunch of calls, right? You're searching, you're creating, you're patching, whatever you're doing, right? All of those get stored right here in this sync logs, right? And again, if you go to the documentation, there's lots of more information of how you can view them, create them, and replay them basically. But if you see here, the whole request gets cached. So since my app basically only has get calls, you'll see all of them are just get calls. But if you look at the values, right, that is going to be interesting. So if I look at the last one, maybe not this one. This one, right? Yep, this is the call that I made. So this is the call that just got added in. But if I look at any one of the calls like this one, right? So I don't know if you can see that, but it has the question mark department ID equal to 20, right? So that is a call that I searched for when I showed you when I was offline, right? Even that with the parameters, with the body, everything gets cached and stored into this sync log. And then you can have your own implementation saying, we've seen customers, they ignore the get calls because it really doesn't make sense to replay the get calls when you're back online, right? So you can have a for each loop on these, ignore the get ones, just take the post and patch ones, and then sync them back to the server, right? Based on your need. But while you're developing, this is a very good place where you can come and check what's in the store and what's being stored and what's happening. And then there are other stores which of course VB internally uses, which we shouldn't touch, right? So but that's pretty much it with this. Yeah, I'll hand it over to, I think, Sean. He can go over the code innovate process while we check for questions, and and then we can come back to Q&A. Yeah, Sean, over to you.
Oh, thank you, Aditya. Okay. Oh, sorry, let me go back 1 second. Oh. Cool, everyone can see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, awesome. Well, first and foremost, I just want to take a moment to thank all of you for taking some time out of your day to attend our presentation and demo. My name is Sean Cartwright. I'm a senior cloud engineer and a program manager here at Oracle. So I want to tell you all about a program that Varun and Ditya and I have been a part of now for going on 4 or 5+ years. So we work for a team known as Code-Innovate. To explain our program, we liken it to an activity that our director would do most every year with his kids when they were younger. He would take his kids on a trip to Legoland, which happens to be near Chicago. And out of all of the attractions and activities at Legoland, their favorite thing to do was to participate in something called the Lego Master Builder class. So during this class, all the kids were given their own clear plastic bag of disassembled Lego pieces without any instructions, much like you would typically normally find in the Lego sets that you buy in the stores. So the adults in the front of the room, pictured here in the top right-hand corner, are known as true, in the green shirts, are known as true Lego master builders. So over the course of the event, they work with these kids on the concept of brick interlocking and how to create smooth faces on objects using Lego pieces. And on this particular day, they learned to build these little penguins with earmuffs. So the goal of the class was first for the kids to have fun. However, in a very short amount of time, they learned to build with Legos in a creative environment using techniques that they were taught by true experts. So we tell that story because in its simplest form, that's what we do here at the Oracle Code-Innovate program. So what Code-Innovate is a 5 half-day online event designed to educate builders and developers like yourselves on Oracle Cloud while producing a first-pass prototype on customer-selected business challenges. So these are use cases that you guys bring to us. So over the course of the week, participants from your teams are paired with an Oracle engineer to guide you through best practices and code development. So during this time, you're going to ideate on your business challenge, you're going to identify tasks to complete, and you're going to partner with us to develop a minimally viable product. So whether you guys are novices or pros in Oracle Cloud, and given that you're attending this presentation today on a pretty advanced topic within Visual Builder Cloud Service, I expect that a lot of you, are pretty familiar with cloud, but we take you as you come, and we'll work with you based on what you need for your use cases. But Code-Innovate is all about making, breaking, and building, real solutions for your guys' most pressing use cases. So how it works is that you bring us your use cases because we want to work on things that you guys want to work on that you've identified as pain points in your own organizations. And through actually building on your use cases and iterating on them over the course of basically 20 development hours, you guys are going to be rapidly getting upskilled. So this is it's a hands-on activity, hands-on keyboard, where we essentially cloud coach, we call it cloud coaching, but essentially people like Aditya and Varun would be over your shoulder while you're driving and sharing your screen and working through the tenancy and actually doing the development on your side. So it's a very much a joint effort on parts of Oracle in your company. So the goal of all of it is to build a first pass prototype. It's not going to be an end-to-end solution in 20 hours, but in some cases, depending on the complexity of the use case, or if it's very simplistic, sometimes we actually can get quite a bit done. But the idea is just to collaborate on on that use case. So, but a point I would like to make is that our program does not only support Visual Builder Cloud Service use cases, although that's the topic for today's webinar specifically. So we support builds with most infrastructure and platform services on Oracle Cloud, including things like cloud native services like Oracle Kubernetes Engine, Oracle Analytics Cloud, OCI Data Service and AI service, data science and AI services, Oracle Digital Assistant, which is our chatbot platform, Oracle Integration Cloud, which encompasses Visual Builder Studio and Visual Builder Cloud Service, and many other different tools. So most times our use case builds actually involve multiple services that comprise the entire prototype solution. So I make this point because oftentimes our webinars are like on a single product or topic, but our team is capable of resourcing specialists within our team and with the larger Oracle specialist organization to meet your needs, to find the people that we need to actually support your use cases. So everything that our team works on is a custom built, tailor fit to your use case. So the requirements, what we ask for are 3 or more builders. And when we say builders, we used to say developers, but depending on the use case and the development skills that you may need, for instance, in Visual Builder Cloud Service, it's often helpful to have skill sets like JavaScript, CSS, HTML. Not required, but it is certainly helpful to have those skill sets. So, but for most products, we just say builders because these are folks from your teams that are eager and willing to learn from us. So it's anyone that wants to build in the cloud, and you're welcome. 20-hour time commitment roughly translates to 5 half days of 4 hours per day. And as I said before, bring your use cases because we want to work on things that you want to work on. 3 weeks of lead time just ensures that we get the correct resourcing for Oracle and for yourselves. We have formal cadence meetings, typically once per week for 30 minutes each week leading up to the event. That's to discuss the use case details, the logistics of the event, when we're actually going to do it, all of the planning process that we've, taken care of over the years to make sure that we have everything lined up so that when we actually hit the event week, that we're ready to start developing. And last but not least, there's no fee to do the event beyond the time commitment for both of our teams and the cost of the cloud services that you consume to build out the use cases. And I would just like to make a note that our program currently only supports customers that have accounts here in North America, so US and Canadian customers. Although usually there are many customers that have offshore resources in India, but the account is based here in the US. So we work with India teams as well. So just wanted to make that note there. And that's what I have for today. So like I said, I just appreciate you guys coming on and learning about the Offline Persistence Toolkit. And any other questions that you guys may have, just shoot them our way. If you're interested now in a Code Innovate, I'm going to put this email address on the screen that you guys can reach us at. You can email Aditya, Varun, or myself, and we can also meet with you and learn more about your use cases. And if you have any questions about whether or not your use case may be an acceptable fit for the program, the least that what I like to do is go through the longer version of this presentation to make sure that I fully educate you guys on what it is, and then we could start talking about specifics on use cases to see if they're a good fit. So that's all I have. Thank you.
All right. Well, if there are no more questions for today, thank you again so much for joining us here, and we hope to see you at the next one. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.